So for this assignment, you don't have to create anything. Instead, you're going to assume the role of audio engineer. So this could be the kind of track that somebody sends to somebody, and the intent that we have with it is to create a mix of it so that all these instruments sound balanced and sound good together. Right now, they intentionally do not. They are dry. Their volumes aren't balanced. Some stuff is too loud. Some stuff is too soft. And we have to go in and place it and make something sound really good. So in order to do that, the first thing we want to start doing is thinking about our balance of volumes. And if you notice, I have my loop for this set to 8 bars. And it's kind of cool to have it that way because you can drag around and work on 8-bar sections. If you notice when we get here to bar 18, that there's a lot more stuff in here than there was before. So this is like where everything is. So I might want to just start by listening there. Now, the first thing I notice is that this lead sound is too loud. Well, how can I tell what sound it is? Well, if I get something and I've never seen it before, I have to find out what's on every track. To find out what's on every track, the best thing to do is click on each track and click these headphones and solo the track out and listen. So that's obviously a kick drum. That's obviously a snare drum. And if I go down here, let's see, this is a lead. That's probably the thing I'm concerned with. Let's listen to what's there. Yes, that's the lead. So I think that's too loud. It's too loud. It's driving me nuts. Right off the bat, I have to lower it. I'll work on it later. Now, you're going to adjust these volumes, but they're not written in stone. You're always going to be adjusting these things. So it's not done until the very end when it's done. And so all we have to do is balance out these volumes. So let's listen. So like if I wanted my snare to be louder, I could bring it up, maybe my kick. Don't make everything too loud, or sometimes you're better off bringing other things down rather than making things loud, because at a certain point, this may start distorting things and stuff like that. So the other thing I need to work on is placing instruments in the mix. Now, typically, our kick and our snare are always down the middle. Usually our bass is too. So what I mean by down the middle is I mean something called panning. Now let's look at the hi-hat for panning. So here's my hi-hat. And these are the effects we're eventually going to use. We'll get to those in a minute. But you'll see that there's a little button here called pan. Now, let's go to just a spot where there's a lot less stuff in it, just maybe here at the beginning. And I can take my hi-hat and just kind of move it, and it'll move left and right in the speakers. So let's turn this up a bit so you can hear it. Now, if you're listening on headphones, you'll hear that it's going to the right speaker and now to the left speaker. So I'm going to keep it over here to the right speaker. And then you'll also see that there's a tambourine in here. Well, it doesn't come in for a while, right? So I'm going to go here, and it looks like it's here. Now, usually when you have instruments like this, you like to separate them by putting them in opposite places in the mix. So if I have two things that sound similar, like a tambourine and a hi-hat, I might separate them like this. So I'm going to solo these two out and let you hear what they sound like. And that tambourine was real soft, so I had to bring it up. You can barely hear it. It's a subtle thing. Okay, so that's how I get about. So I'll just continue to do this. Now let me take these things out of solo. I'll continue to do this. Do I want my bass louder or softer? I've got this horn. You'll hear it in a second. Okay, So we can do that. So what we just want to do is get a rough of pan and volume, and then we're going to get ready to add effects. Okay, so that's really what we're working on. So if I start with effects, the effects appear over here on the right. Now, the very first effect that you're going to have for everything is going to be some kind of an EQ situation. So you'll see that this has already on it a 2-band EQ. Now, your effects show up down here. And if you want to add any, let's look at the effects panel over here. So here's the effects panel. And again, to get there, I opened this up from here. And let's see if I click here. And once I open it up, if you don't see effects show up here, if you're still getting your loops, just click on this icon that looks like faders and you'll get your effects. So let's look at the effects panel. You've got these are all sort of distortion type of effects. Distortion is things like guitar players use on guitars and things like this. These are kind of what we call modulation effects in pink. These will add things like thickening and chorus. I'll demo a few of them. This is more, these are reverbs and delays in the turquoise here. We'll be using a lot of reverbs and things like that to make this sound better. And these down here with the brown icons are compression, or what we call, it's a form of processing, and we'll look at that in a moment. And then you have some various different kind of extra little effects. So if I want to do some things with some EQ, I want to work on the EQ of my bass drum. So you see, I have this one called Visual EQ. I think that's the best one to start with when you're trying to learn how to do EQs. As a matter of fact, we can just delete this one that's already in there. We don't need it. And if I want to, I need to move this so we can work in here. I need to hit this open button so we can look at it. Now, this is an EQ, and everything, again, as I explained in class, everything at the bottom on the left is going to be either lower bass frequencies, and everything on the right is going to be top frequencies. And you can kind of play with these. So if I want to work on my bass drum, I'm going to open up the EQ and I'm going to play it. And so you can feel that's not good. So if I just wanted to thicken it up a little bit, I can do that. If I want to mute it a bit, I can take off the top end. Just play with it until it sounds good. Just play with these things till they sound good. And so I've kind of got my bass drum where I want it to go. Okay, so here's without it. So you hear how that thickened it up? Okay, so that's one thing I can do. Of course, I'll do the same thing with my snare. I'll work on that and all these other instruments. So first thing you do is volumes and pans, then you try to work with EQ for everything. So for every track, I would drag in this, let's go to the, let's go to the electric piano. And I'm going to also bring in the visual EQ, and I'm going to open it. And just play with it. Now, another thing engineers do, this is kind of an advanced concept it's called high passing, where we just strip all the bottom off of an instrument unless we need it. We're obviously not going to do that with our low-end instruments like basses and kick drums, but with these things, and what this does is you don't really notice it, but it'll clear up the whole mix. Now, don't worry about that if you're new to this. This is just something for those people who are a little more advanced with this. So let's listen to this soloed out. Now, another thing you can do with EQ, see this thing, you can make it narrower or wider. The narrower you make it. Now, what I could do is find something that doesn't sound good and get rid of it. See how that's kind of harsh right there? Oh, let's take that out of there. Notice when I do it, I make this thing skinny. Just because I'm just taking out, if I take out too much, I won't have a Rhodes, I won't have a piano anymore. Now I can warm it up here. And you just do that to all the instruments. So you can just do that. Now, it's not a good idea to listen in solo for too long. It's always good to put it back in and just play with it. So that's all we got to do. That's just for our volumes and everything. The next thing we want to do is start to add some processing and some other things. So the next thing I might want to do is let's work on the bass a little bit. Okay, so here's our bass. And again, I'm not completing all this. This is just getting you started with things. So for the bass, I'm also going to get some EQ. Now, another thing that you might want to consider, oh, that's not the EQ I wanted, although that one would be fine. I'm going to just stick with the visual EQ for now. And for the bass, another thing to consider is instruments need to have their own space in the frequency range. Now, don't belabor this too much if you're new to this, but if you're not, here, if I look at my bass drum and I open up the EQ, see this? See this thing that jumps up? See where that is? We're right here, right around 100, right between, it's like around 90 something, 90 hertz. That's where the bass drum is thickest. Now, that's its space. That's where it exists. So if I go here to my bass and I do the same thing, you can see that it also is peaking in exact the same spot. So I might want to notch that out a bit and then bring up what's around it. And that way they sound clearer together. It's just something you have to play with. It's just the way mixing works. So, and I might want to take top end. Again, you can do what you want. There's no right or wrong to this. Just do it till you think it sounds good. The purpose of this exercise is let me shut the music off. The purpose of this exercise is to not make you the world's greatest mix engineer, although if that happens, I'll be happy. However, I do want you just to experiment with it and get the experience doing it and know what goes into it. So don't get too stressed out about these things. You just play. Okay, so we're going to go on with that. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, and you can add this to a lot of your instruments, is we're going to add something called dynamics, and we're going to add what's called actually compression. So let's see where our compressors are in here. There's a dynamics compressor, there's compressor 1, and those seem to be the only ones. So let's put a compressor on the bass. So let's solo out our bass. Again, it's not always a good idea to keep soloing out, but I'm doing it for clarity. So I'm going to put in, now in order for it to start compressing, you need to take this threshold thing and lower it. Hear the difference? Now there's a lot of stuff you can play with on here to taste. Okay, usually for bass, I'm not going to get too into the compression settings, but it's typically the settings that you get by default in this thing are pretty good to start with for most people until you really know what you're doing. Feel free to play with these things if you like. But I usually see this little thing that's bouncing over here. I usually will mess with my threshold somewhere so that that's hitting somewhere between 3 and 5. And if you do that on all your instruments, it will tighten them up a bit. And it also gives you the ability to make your instrument a little louder in the mix, because what a compressor does is evens out the volumes of what you're doing. So let's listen to it without it and with it. Without. You hear the presence it brings to it? So we put compression on instruments very subtly. You never want this white line going way up down here or anything like that. In fact, I would keep it somewhere even down here on the 3 level is around here is even good. Okay, let's hear with and without again. So you can try that on all your instruments. Now, one of the instruments that's really going to need it is the lead. So, because that really needs to be evened out a lot, because it's kind of obnoxious until you fix it properly. So that would be our compression. And the only other thing we need to start thinking about are EQ and compression are most important. Now we might want to think about things like reverbs. So let's go to our snare drum and listen to the snare drum. So now what reverb will do is give the sound of a room. Now you'll notice there's reverb right on the channel. Here. So if you like the reverb you're going to get there, here, let me solo the snare out so you can hear just that with the snare. Here's no reverb. And here's reverb. Now that's too much, but okay, so here's the rule. Get it just to where you like it, and then bring it back a few notches. And that is what professional engineers have been doing for the last 100 years. So because you don't want it all washed out unless you're going for an effect. But this kind of just gives it like some, it's like it's in a room. It gives it more ambiance. Here's none, and here's where we were. Listen closely. Especially listen to the sound after the snare hits. See, I do this with just a solo snare because it's real obvious where you can hear the reverb. If you did it with all the instruments in, you wouldn't really hear it, would you? So the next thing I want to do is, so I want to add those to a lot of instruments. Let's look at this lead track, and I'm gonna solo that out. See, now that will really benefit from a reverb. So listen to it in the whole track now, with everything. It's already better by just putting some in. Now I can also compress it. And of course, that's going to change my volume a little bit. So I can. Now, another thing I could add to this would be something like a delay. And so let's see what that sounds like. Okay, you can feel free to try any of these things on here. So if I put a delay on here. So a delay creates like an echo. There's without it. There's with it. Now, when you get your delay, make sure this time thing is on, because it will actually sync it to the time of the track so it doesn't sound funny. And I might low cut it a little bit. Again, just play with it. till it sounds good. That's all I want you to do, is just try these effects out and play with it. You can just take one, even if you don't know what it is, and try it out. Maybe I'll try this thing. It says chorus. Let's see what that does. Let's listen to that. Here's without it. Hear how the chorus does it? What the name implies, it makes it sound like it's a chorus, like it thickens it. And again. Now maybe you want like a silly effect like that, or a kind of an outer space effect, or maybe you don't. Or maybe you don't want it at all. Just try, if you don't like it, just hit the X and try something else. Okay, maybe tape warble. Let's see what that does. I kind of like that. Kind of adds like a little warble effect. I didn't know what that was going to do when I put that on there. I just tried it. Well, I kind of knew what it was going to do. And now maybe it might be too much. But maybe a little bit of that makes it a little more interesting than it was before. It's entirely up to you on what you want to do. So, let's look at our electric piano and let's just play with some various different things here. Let's see what a stereo chorus will do to a piano. So let's solo it out. Okay, so that makes it a lot bigger and thicker and prettier. But if you're not going for that sound, then don't use it. But it just shows you what you can do and what you can try. Let's try some other stuff on here. Let's try this thing called auto wah. These pink ones are great for really changing sounds. Okay, I like what that's doing. And then, of course, we've got this little trombone thing here, which is pretty boring, and I intentionally put it in for that purpose. Let's listen to it. That's all it is. Okay, so this could use some stuff. Maybe I'll put a little tape warble on it, just to make it sound like, you know why we use tape warble? To give it that lo-fi effect, to make it sound like it came off of a tape somewhere or something like that, right? But the thing that this needs the most is, I would say, delay. So it will be here. Okay, so oh, I like that. I turned that on. Remember I said turn that on? I actually didn't have it on in the last track I showed you. And this will sync it. See, these are quarter notes, half note. I like the quarter note. So if you turn this on, when you're using a delay, you probably want to turn this on and select either quarter note or eighth note, not dotted eighth note, just plain 1/8 note. See how you can turn this knob and get those? Okay, so I'm going to... And I also think this needs to sound like it's in the same room as everything else, so I'm going to bring my reverb up. And you can just go with all the instruments and try all these things out. Now, another thing I could maybe do with this this trumpet, or this trombone rather, let's turn it up a little bit, is I might add automation to it. So your automation is over here, and it's this little line right here. Now to get automation, I just click it, and I can pick what I want to automate. So my options are pan, sweep, and volume. I'm going to just play with pan. You can play with any of these if you like. Again, this is your mix, so you can do what you want. I just want you to try stuff out. So here's pan. Now here's the way an automation works in this program. When I select it, here's the option I'm selecting. This is going to if I take a dot, I just click on this line and make a dot. And when I have this when I have this extreme one way, it's going to pan remember panning is moving the sound from left to right. So if I want this to kind of go back and forth for sort of like a psychedelic kind of effect, I can add this in there. So let's see what that first bar sounds like with the automation I put in. Okay, so let's check this out. Let's go back to the beginning. Okay, so I hear what I think I like to do. I think I'm going to keep it at I don't need these dots. Okay, so what I'm going to do is keep it every time that trumpet hits, and this is just me, you don't have to do it the way I do it. Every time that trumpet hits, I want it to be in an opposite speaker. So I'm going to zigzag this thing. Okay, so this is what you get. You don't have to do this, but it's a cool way to use automation. And so now it should be the other speaker. And if I think that's too far, then I just don't make my line as big. Maybe I want to make it more subtle. So these are your automations. Now, you just keep doing this till you listen to everything, and it just sounds like you want it to sound. And you want it to sound great. So on some of these instruments, now, I'm going to give you a bullet list of accompany this assignment of, good effects and bad effects to start to try. There's no right or wrong. I've used guitar effects on cymbals before. There's no right or wrong, but there are, let's say, norms, and there are things. So I'm going to give you some bulleted list of the norms of some of these things for you to try. So I just want you to create a mix, and when it's done, you've got a mix. And that's what I want to do for you. Now, the next thing you might want to consider is when you're done. Now, I just want to look at your assignment when it's done, so you don't have to worry about exporting it. So this next thing you don't really have to do, but you might want to, because once we mix, we want to hear the whole thing finished. You see this download mix? See, here it's going to say, do you want to master? For now, say no. We're going to play with that later. And what this is going to do is create a mix for you. And it's going to download it to whatever computer you're on. Okay, so mine got downloaded as a WAV file. So then that's a complete finished project that you can share. You can put it on streaming services. You can put it on YouTube. You can put it on SoundCloud. You can share it with your grandmother. I don't care what you do with it. But these are the things that can be done. By the way, don't put it on SoundCloud, and don't, because you will have plagiarism issues because you didn't write the track. But I just wanted to show you that could be done. So when you're done, just save the project as normal, because I will be able to take a look at it, just play with it, try out your mix, do your best, have fun with it, visit it from time to time. If you really want to do this right, do it one day, listen to it in your car, and come back and fix stuff. That's the way a lot of mix people do it. They listen to it in lots of different places and try things. So just try out the effects. It's that easy.